And talking of that debate, Americans had their eyes glued to television screens last night as Donald Trump and Kamala Harris went head-to-head in their first live televised presidential debate. So, who came out on top and who will take the White House in November? Here to discuss all of Harris's baits and Trump's attacks is Professor at DePaul University College of Law, Alberto Coll. Good evening, Professor.
Hi, it's delightful to be here with you.
Now give it to me straight. Who won?
Okay, so if I had been a debating coach, I would have given the victory to Kamala Harris. She was focused, she was very disciplined, and she was able to provoke Trump by bringing up points that she knew ahead of time, that her advisors had told her ahead of time, would get him all provoked, would get him all emotional, and would get him off the key arguments that he needed to use against her to win that debate. So across the board, she succeeded. Trump was very emotional. He was angry. He was also very disorganized. And I think that, to win this debate, he needed to ignore Kamala Harris's goading, provocations, and so on, and just stick to the most effective lines of argument, which would have been to say, look, here is the evidence. These are the issues on which you, Vice President, have been part of the current administration. And these are all the things that the current administration has done that have been very bad for the United States. Instead of doing that, he went all over the place and went into all kinds of what we call rabbit holes. So I'd say she won the debate. Now, the next question is, how much will this matter? And that's another issue.
Well, you've stolen my question there, because that's exactly the next question I had for you. Do these debates really matter to American voters when they go to the polls in November?
So I think it's hard to know. They matter a bit, but not as much as we tend to think, okay? So in the past, we have had candidates who have had bad debates and they have recovered. This is a very tight race. And in fact, the latest polls showed a few days ago that Trump and Kamala Harris were tied, and that Kamala Harris had lost the bump in polling that she had received right after the Democratic convention. So she was plateauing, and Trump was gaining some momentum, and they were essentially tied. Now, we're going to have to wait another week, maybe 10 days, for the polls to give you an idea of whether the debate really changed this dynamic. And then secondly, how long did it change it? Because remember, we still have a good 8 weeks left to Election Day. So it may be that Kamala Harris gets a temporary bump in the polls as a result of her stronger debate performance. But then if Trump keeps doing what he has been doing in the past 2 weeks, which is trying to stick more to policy, to criticizing Kamala Harris, to tying her to the current administration, because the current administration is very unpopular. So if he can do that, he could then recover some of that ground. But, at the end of the day, it's very hard to predict how this is going to play out. But definitely, the debate helped her, hurt him, and now the next 4 weeks are going to be critical and to see exactly whether Trump can turn things around, recover, and continue going on the attack against her on policy issues that the average middle-of-the-road voter wants to hear more about.
As you say, a lot of things can happen over a couple of weeks. Were there any moments to you that felt like big hits from either side that will have a lasting impact? The type of moment that will be making the rounds on social media for weeks to come.
I mean, social media can pick up on all these things, but this was not a knockout debate. This, unlike Trump's debate with Biden, in which, Biden blew it big time. This was not a debate in which Kamala Harris was able to land a lethal punch on Trump, okay? She defeated him, but it was not a knockout punch. Because by now, remember, all Americans pretty much know about Donald Trump, okay? They know who he is. They know all his flaws. They know all of his limitations, his personality. They know that very well. So they're eager to know more about her. The debate showed some very good things about her, but one debate is not enough. So I don't think that there were any moments in the debate in which you could say, okay, that was the end of the campaign. The election is over.
Kamala Harris also suggested that Poland could be next if Ukraine loses the war. What did you make of that?
Well, I think it's not just Kamala Harris. I mean, many conservative Republicans in the Senate also agree that Poland would be in grave danger if Russia wins the war against Ukraine. And I think that in the United States Senate, there is a consensus on this issue that Poland would be next. And not only Poland, but the Baltic states. And that therefore, when we talk about aiding Ukraine, we're not just talking about aiding a country out of moral sentiments. We're talking about aiding a country which, if Russia takes it over, will enable Russia to pose an even greater threat to the NATO alliance, to Poland, to the Baltic states. And there, remember, the United States has an ironclad commitment to defend NATO countries. And it is in our interests. It's not a matter of just moral values. It's in our interest to make sure that Poland remains secure and that Russia does not take over Ukraine and is able to pose a major threat to Eastern Europe.
And while you're with us, I want to ask too, US Foreign Secretary Antony Blinken and British Secretary of State David Lammy, they visited Ukraine today. They pledged further support. How significant is that at such a critical time in the conflict?
Okay, so watch for the following, okay? For the past few months, Zelensky has been wanting the United States to lift down the restrictions on the use by Ukraine of the British Storm Shadow missiles, okay? So these are very effective, very powerful missiles. The British have given those to Ukraine, but the Americans have said, these missiles have some US components, and therefore you have to tell the Ukrainians that they cannot use these for long-range strikes on Russian territory. Zelensky has been saying, look, this is untenable. Russia is using long-range strikes against us. We have to defend ourselves. The British agree with the Ukrainians, but they have been trying to now persuade the Biden administration to drop those restrictions. If the Biden administration agrees to do that in the next few days, then we have a good step for Ukraine. Let's see what happens, because now everybody is well aware that this is a long, drawn-out war. We are in it for the long haul. This is a war of attrition. And right now, Russia, however slightly, seems to be winning this conflict because they have endless resources of manpower and weapons to throw at the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians have to figure out a way to hit the Russians hard, to hurt them. And the only way to do that is with long-range strike weapons, but they need permission from the West, which is their supplier of these long-range strike weapons.
Alberto Coll, Professor at DePaul University College of Law. Thank you again for your time.
I'm delighted. Thank you. Have a great night.
And that's World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.